All right, well, good evening and welcome. My name is Drew Desker. I'm the director here at Kopernik Observatory. It's great to have a nice approximate full house, and also like to welcome those watching on the live stream. By show of hands, who's here for the first time? Wow, okay, a good number. And for those, the second question is who here is a member? All right, not as many, a couple people. All right. Well, for those that raise their hand first, the people who raise their hand second actually have very special knowledge of a good deal, and that's a Kopernik membership. Kopernik, we are a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, but we belong to a consortium of science centers called the ASTC, Association of Science and Technology Centers, and a Kopernik membership actually gets you into 350 other science centers for free. It's, quite frankly, one of the best deals you will ever get. You could go down to the Franklin Institute, you could go to the Roberson Museum of Science Center, the Museum of Science and Technology up in Syracuse, the Intrepid down in New York City, Franklin Institute in Philly, and you get in for free. And it's part of what helps keep us doing what we're doing. So every Friday night we try to do some program of some aspect of science or technology. It's not always about astronomy, although today is in fact about astronomy. And then of course if it's clear out, and like we have tonight, we're going to ask you to come outside and look through our scopes. And I have a rule is that you cannot leave Kopernik until you look through a scope. So I'd like to have your keys now. But no, seriously, we really invite you to come out here to take a look through our scopes. We have some great scopes. We also have some scopes we have out in the yard that are pretty sort of user accessible, and you're going to learn about those scopes later on today. Now, 2.5 years ago, March of 2020, COVID basically shut us down. And so we said, well, okay, we'll stop our public programs for a couple of weeks. We'll let this thing blow over. And here we are, right? But when it got to be about May, we decided, it was clear that this thing was going to be a long-term kind of a commitment. And we wanted to find a way to stay connected with the public. So we started doing live streaming. And so if any of you happen to watch the first live streams, they were, let's say, they were a good effort, but they're pretty rough. We then, over the time, started upgrading our equipment, and now we have actually nearly 11,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel. We've done a number of pretty special live streams. We did a live stream back in the end of 2020 where Jupiter and Saturn, that conjunction was like they were right next to each other. We had probably 4,000 or 5,000 people on at that time. Does anybody happen to remember back in May there was a lunar eclipse in the middle of May? Well, Jeremy, our live stream astronomer who is back behind here, he brought his gear up here. We put cameras on the scope, and he did basically a 4-hour live stream of the lunar eclipse. At one point, we had over 25,000 people on our YouTube live stream at the same time. And the chat, if you've ever seen a YouTube chat, it was just flying by like a CVS receipt. It was crazy. In fact, some people were saying, we were watching NASA's live stream, but we came to your live stream because we like yours better. So our live stream has been great. It's given us an opportunity to literally reach people around the world. And what's also great about these live streams is, again, if you can't make it here on a Friday evening, you can watch from wherever. And if you got questions for the presenter, you just type it right into the chat, and Jeremy will convey that to the speaker. Or if you completely miss it, you can actually go to our YouTube, and all of our live streams are recorded and up there, so you can pick those up at your convenience. So it's a great opportunity to stay connected with us, and we really enjoy doing it. So we're going to get to tonight's program. Again, we're really all about planting seeds here. We do a lot of outreach to students. We have a very strong summer camp program. And again, we're not going to turn everybody into a scientist or an engineer, but we're just trying to plant some seeds. And I'll tell this little story. We have a program called Girl Power Science, and it's specifically aimed at girls that are between like 3rd and 8th grade. And we usually do it twice a year. And it's we're trying to promote more women in STEM careers. So a couple of years ago, we had an astrophysicist from NASA talk about the work that she does. Like she's using satellites to look at carbon dioxide levels of the Earth and how that affects global warming. And then, because it's a video conference, our girls get to ask her questions. And one of the girls asked, "How did you get interested in astrophysics?" And her answer was great. She said, "Well, when I was in college, I was an English major, but my boyfriend was a physics major. We would go from observatory to observatory. I eventually dumped the boyfriend, but I kept the astronomy." Now she has her PhD in astrophysics and works at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. So you never know where a seed's going to get planted. So again, we really love these Friday night programs. We're glad you could join us. We're glad that for those watching on the live stream that you could join us here. And so we're going to turn this over to our main presenter. We have a dual presenters, is Art Cacciola and Dave Daniels. They're both members of the Kopernik Astronomical Society. They're the resident astronomy club here. And you could have no better people to tell you about how exciting astronomy is. And no, you don't have to spend $250,000 to enjoy astronomy. So with that, Art, we're going to get you wired up. And we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. So Dave and I will be giving a talk. The talk is designed for beginners. It's going to be like a shotgun approach. It's going to be hitting you with a lot of information, too much at times, not enough at times, but you're going to get a general overview. But feel free to ask questions, and we're going to demonstrate stuff here and outside later on. Okay? So we'll get started with the PowerPoint. Okay. All right, so it's called Beginning Telescopes. Thank you. So that's, you'll hear me talk when I give the talk about the little telescope we have in the 6-inch dome, and the partner that bought the second best one, and this is the guy, Don Yeyer. He sold it to us 35 years ago, but that's Don. So talking about buying your first telescope, you have to know what do you want to observe. Okay, when you're buying a vehicle, you want to haul a soccer team, you want to have something that's fuel efficient, electric, you want a school bus, you want a tractor trailer. What do you want to do with it? Okay, how much are you willing to spend? Not how much can you spend, because you spend more than you want to anyway, but how much are you willing to spend? And then, is portability important? Do you have a lot of room to store it outside in a garage or in a shed? Or do you have to pack it up and put it in your closet? Or is it going to be in the corner of your living room for a while? And then, same thing about storage. And then, do you want to do astrophotography? That's nothing I would recommend you do right away, although Mark will tell us a little bit about that in a little while, what he's done with his little cell phone. So, some general advice is you want to buy the largest aperture or diameter of the mirror or the primary lens that you can afford, okay, within your budget, or you can physically handle, because they get really big and heavy. The larger the aperture, the more light gathering it has, the more ability to see dim things. Thus, the higher the resolution, the higher the clearness, and the larger the image can be and still be sharp. There are trade-offs, and the three trade-offs are aperture, and then there's price, and then there's portability, and they're all intertwined. So you have to kind of pick your medium where you want to be. And power is relatively meaningless. We'll talk about this a little bit more later on. It's really controlled by the eyepiece used and the observing conditions, okay, more than how much power it can actually do. And then remember that a small scope with high quality optics can give you a super views of the universe. All right, so what do I want to observe? Well, there are planets like Saturn and Jupiter, the moon, double stars like Albireo, famous double star, and there are open clusters like that's the Pleiades, the Subaru, the Seven Sisters. It's called M45. So for that, you might consider a refracting telescope, a telescope that has a lens in the front. If you want to observe deep sky, like galaxies or nebula, glowing gas, where stars died and new stars are forming. Star clusters like M13, which is ancient stars that are held together by gravity. There are hundreds of thousands of stars all held together by gravity. Comets, well, if you're looking at that, you might consider a reflector, which uses a mirror, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So you want to see it all on a limited budget, then you might want to consider the reflector because it's more versatile. It's not a strict rule, but in general, you get more performance for the money. So this is the optics of a refractor. So the refractor has the images formed by the objective lens right up there. And I kept saying I had to get a pointer, and I kept forgetting. It has a clear pathway, so there's nothing obstructing the light from the lens till it hits the eyepiece. Okay, it's just clear. The optics are enclosed, so they're in a tube where dirt and moisture won't get in there. Cheaper lenses suffer from what they call chromatic aberration, which means that basically red and blue light doesn't focus at the same point. So when you're looking at something, you're going to get these color shifts. And it's going to look a little red, a little blue. It's going to look kind of weird, kind of like looking at 3D glasses. So some refractor options, some prices, okay. A small one, like a 2-inch, goes from anywhere from $60 for an inexpensive one, or you can get a real high-quality one for over $1,000. An 80 millimeter, again, you get an inexpensive one for about $140. These are prices as of beginning of this week, to over $2,000. 120 millimeter, a 5-inch, which is kind of like this one, for between $560 and over $4,000. Larger apertures are very expensive. The 6-inch we have out in the dome is like $14,000. Okay, so it gets pretty good. And by the way, you have to wait 8 years for Roland Christian to make you one. So there's a waiting list. So if you have to consider the cost, refractors are much cost more for a given size. So a refractor, the one with the lens, costs more for the same size than the reflector would. But for astrophotography, you need a more expensive mount as well. So there's an image of a camera in place of the eyepiece where the telescope becomes the lens. So using astrophotography, a very simple way to do that. So this is a refractor now. It has a mirror. It has a curved mirror on the bottom here. So light comes in the tube, hits the curved mirror, and the curved mirror focuses it back up like a funnel in a cone up to the top when it hits what they call the secondary mirror. And the secondary mirror just reflects it back out the eyepiece. So the light path on this is actually goes down and most of the way up and then up to the side. So that telescope, which is like this one, if you want to know the focal length, it's really about this long, okay? But it's because of the mirrors and stuff, it helps it that way. Images formed by a curved parabolic mirror. It has an obstructed pathway, so when light comes in, it has to get past what they call the spider with the secondary mirror, and it kind of blocks some of your light, so it's going to dim it a little bit, but it's nothing that's really that terrible. It has an open pathway. The tube is open on the top, so unless you cover it like Dave has his scope covered, you're going to get dirt and dust on the mirror. It has a folded pathway where the light comes in, goes up and out. And then there's no chromatic aberration, none of that distortion of color. Thank you. It's a bit more difficult to point, but really not that much more difficult. It's kind of like aiming a cannon. So here's some options with refractors. It's called the Dobsonian. John Dobson, who's been up here about 3 times, he passed away now. He passed away when he was about 96, a couple of years ago. Just like the Queen. Huh. Anyway, he designed this mount. He'd have people, he did what they call sidewalk astronomy. And he would just go out on a sidewalk on a corner and just point the scope at Jupiter or the moon, and people would come and look through the scope. And people got interested. They wanted. So he went to the shipyard in California there and got port glass. And he would have them grind mirrors and then coat them to make the telescope. But when it came to getting a mount for it, it got to be real expensive. So he designed this mount. It's going to wreck this, but it's like, goes on a Lazy Susan back and forth, swivels up and down, kind of like a cannon. Okay? It's pretty simple. And he never liked the name Dobsonian after John Dobson. We call it Dob. He wanted to have it called a sidewalk mount. And but popular opinion changed it to Dob. They named it after him anyway. So you can get a 4 to 6 inch, so that's a 6 inch, for about $130 to $500. An 8 inch, which we have out in the dome. So these have gone up a lot in price. When I gave this talk last in 2019 or 2021, this was like half as much. But these have gone up a lot. Then there's the 10 inch. Again, it gets more pricey. And then you have the 14 to 16 inch Dob, and they get really pricey. All right. So then there's the Smith-Cassegrain, SCT, Catadioptic, and Muscavuto designs. And there's some very famous ones. One is the Questar. Remember that man I showed you before, Don Yair? He makes all the eyepieces. He passed away a few months ago, but his company made all the eyepieces for that little telescope that sells for $5,600 to $7,500. He made all those high-quality eyepieces. There's a Meade LX85, is 6 inch, computerized, $2,300. It has folded optics, again. Images formed by multiple mirrors and lenses. It's a closed system, so it's not open to dust and moisture. It's compact, and it's medium to high price. So the optics of a Smith-Cassegrain is light comes in the tube, hits that curved mirror down here, and like the other one, it goes up in a cone, and this time it hits the front of the corrector plate, which is the plate on the front. And on the back of it is a mirror, and it shoots the light straight back. And that curved mirror on the bottom is actually like a donut, has a hole in it. So light goes 3 times, down and up and down and out to the side. So that's the advantage of that design. Dave, why don't you take over for a while? I get a drink of water.
Of all the telescopes that ARC was going through, you can put them into two general categories. One category is a go-to, and the other is something really quick, something small that you can take out in the driveway and just set up at a moment's notice, called a grab and go. Now, a go-to, that sounds kind of easy. This is the control unit for a typical go-to telescope. So you think, just pushing a couple buttons, it will head off and look at either a planet or look at a star cluster or a galaxy. It's pretty easy. Well, there's a lot more behind that. And once we finish the presentations up here, I'm going to take this telescope and kind of go through a lot of the hidden pieces and what really makes that a go-to telescope. We'll explain it. So if that is the direction you may be headed, I want you to understand what's involved with these go-to telescopes. They are very good, they are very easy to set them up, but there's a little bit of work you've got to go through. Then on the grab and go, we've got a couple grab and goes here tonight, and we'll talk about them secondary. So, Art, back to you.
Thank you. So, changing eyepieces. So, when I talked before about magnification, not just your scope, but the conditions of the sky will make a difference in how much magnification you can get. If you try to put too much power on, it's like looking at a newspaper with a magnifying glass. You see all the little dots, but you don't really see a clear image. So you want to choose the right magnification for the object and for the conditions and your scope. But you really want to have, ideally, a set of 2 or 3 eyepieces. Now the eyepieces are interchangeable. I take this eyepiece out, and I come over here and I change it with this eyepiece, okay? Or I have different power. So this is a 25 millimeter, which is a kind of a normal mid-range eyepiece. It's not really high power, but it's not really wide angle. It's kind of like a good one to start. And then you might want to have another eyepiece like a 10 or a 12 millimeter, okay, which is twice as powerful. And then you might want to have an 8 or a 6 that would look at like the rings of Saturn or the craters on the moon, something that's really bright that you can see with good conditions. So usually start with the lowest power and the widest field. That gives you the widest amount of the sky you get at one time. And then once you get it in there and you get it centered, then you switch to the next higher power, and then the next higher power. And you keep doing that until you say, it's too much. Then you go back to the last one and do that. So depending on the sky and atmospheric conditions, use the highest power that seems to work. There's another device called a Barlow. This is an example of a Barlow. It just goes beneath the eyepiece. And what it does is it effectively doubles this eyepiece. So this eyepiece, which is 25, becomes a 12 and a half. And so it can save you some money. It's not quite as good as having another eyepiece, but it's a lot cheaper, and you can use it with all. And then there's a moon filter. This isn't that expensive. It's about $10, $14. But for a night like tonight, when the moon's out, you want to look at the moon. Astronomers, we like looking at the moon, but not tonight. It's too bright. So this will, in any event, use it, look at the moon last, because it'll kill your night vision. But we screw this neutral density filter. These just screw into the bottom of the eyepiece, just like that, and then you put it in the scope. So that's a nice thing to have too. And they have other color filters for looking at Mars and Jupiter and stuff, and brings out different features. All right. So the refiners. So pointing something in a telescope, everything looks brighter. So you're looking up at the sky, oh, that's that bright star I want. You look in the telescope, oh my gosh, you got 50 bright stars. which is the one I want? You get out, look again. Oh, I think it's that one, and you're not sure. So you have a finder scope. It's a small power, little telescope, or not even any power, and it lets you find the object. We'll talk more about that. But there's low power, okay, with a wide field of view. Those are like little 6 by 30 and 8 by 24 or something finders. They go parallel to the scope. Sometimes they have a crosshair in the front. Sometimes the crosshair is illuminated, so it's red, and it glows in the dark. There's a thing called the Telrad. There's one on the back of the orange scope back there. It's not any magnification. It's just you look through it, and it's looking at the sky just like you're looking at it normally, and you turn it on, and there's a bullseye with concentric circles. And now you can move it to that bright star that you want and center it on there, and that's how that works. And then the red dot finders, which are smaller and a little less expensive, but optically the same thing, a little red dot that does that for you. So before you observe, before you have a night, you don't want to just take your telescope out at night. You want to take it out while it's getting dark, before it's dark. You want to focus on a terrestrial object, some object in the daytime. Try to see something that's far away and distinct, such as a cell tower, a telephone pole, maybe a barn silo, something like that. And then using one of the two large focus knobs, like here, or here, these are the focus knobs, you focus it on the object. Now, because you're looking at something relatively close, you're going to have to rack the focus pretty much all the way out and then focus till it's clear. But when you're observing at night at something far away, like a planet or a nebula or a galaxy, you're going to want to crank it in quite a bit, okay? So don't say, oh, my telescope doesn't work. It's just not focused. You have to focus it, okay? So you need more back focus. You want to line the telescope in the finder. So the finder isn't any good. If I look in this finder, and I get it right on what I want, if I look in here and it's not in there, it's not any good to me. So what you do in the daytime is you find the object in the telescope. Sometimes I find the finder first, then go to the telescope. And I center it on the pole, and I see where that bolt is, okay, I can see that. And now when I leave the telescope alone, and it's not moving because the Earth, everything's moving the same, now I come over here and I move these couple of screws, and I adjust it till I get the crosshairs in the same point. Now at night, when I go to observe, I just take it out, and I can use my finder effectively. Try to do this with a star. Again, you're not looking at the same star, okay? You're going to have a real hard time. So sometimes there are 2 knobs like that one. Sometimes there are 3. Sometimes there are 6. But you do trial and error and adjust it. So now we'll talk a little bit about mounts. Different telescope mounts have different axes of rotation. So the equatorial has one axis aligned with the Earth's axis. So Dave's German equatorial mount, okay. Anyway, it goes in an arc because the stars move in an arc across the sky. Alt-Az, this is an Alt-Az, goes up and down side to side, as is the Dobsonian, okay? And as this one is as well. Up and down, right and left. The mount can make or break a good telescope. So you got to keep it solid and stable. So sometimes people buy a good telescope but buy a cheap mount. It's like buying a really expensive car and getting really tiny, junky tires. You're not going to have good handling. You're not going to have good control. You need a solid mount to go along with the telescope. And sometimes that could cost almost as much or as much as a telescope. All right, so like buying a boat, this hobby could end up like chasing a rabbit down a rabbit hole. Okay, it can become a big money pit. So you got to keep in your head. I remember when I first bought my first canoe, I was so cool. I bought my canoe, Then I had to get roof racks and paddles and life preservers and whistles and all this other stuff. Okay, yeah, Dave has a boat, so he's laughing. He knows. Here's some of the gizmos we can get. Webcams. So when you see these great images of the planets, so the planets go what they call in and out of good seeing. When you're looking at the planet, it'll be really sharp for just an instant, then it gets blurry again. Then it gets sharp, and it gets blurry. A webcam will capture like 1,500 images, and then the computer will choose the best 150 of those, and then you get a good image. So that's a nice feature. CCD camera, we have those today, digital cameras. Another thing like that. So the CCD we have on the 20-inch when you go outside, that's an FLI Finger Lakes instrument made right here in Binghamton. And it's a high-quality digital camera used for doing real astrophotography and scientific research. Their go-to telescopes, those are the ones that have these hand controls, okay? And Dave's going to talk more about that in a little bit. Binocular eyepieces, so 2 eyes are better than 1. So in the eyepiece you put this device in called a bino viewer, and you look in it and you have 2 eyepieces, and you can see things better. You know, when you go to the eye doctor, read a line, you can read so far, read a line, then you look at both eyes, you can see further. How could that be? Because both eyes work together. That's why the bino viewer works. Additional eyepieces. So you start out with 2, maybe 3, maybe just 1, and as you go. So eyepieces, they don't go bad. They don't expire. And if you don't throw them around and you keep them in the case or covered up, they'll last you for a lifetime, okay? And they're interchangeable. There are 2 basic sizes. There's the 1 1/4 and there's the 2-inch. A lot of the better scopes have 2-inch eyepieces, which are like 3-4 times as expensive, but they're better. Solar scopes and accessories. So solar scopes like the Cornetto PST, Personal Solar Telescope, that's designed for looking at the sun. I have to tell you, and you'll hear me say this 100 times every time we talk about this, never look at the sun in a telescope or binoculars because you'll go blind like instantly. You'll burn a hole right through your retina, okay? Don't. You have a special filter, special things on it, Herschel wedge or a solar filter, only cuts out certain wavelengths, then it's safe, okay? And then there's more stuff too. Webcam is the cheapest way to do astrophotography, but you might want to need a laptop unless you have a long wire to your desktop. All right, so here's a simple option is a pair of binoculars, 10 by 50. So most of the binoculars you buy are 7 by 35. They're for terrestrial. They're for daytime, looking at the ball game, looking at the birds, looking at the mountains. 7-time magnification, 35 aperture, which gives you enough light in the daytime. But at night, you want to have a 50-millimeter eyepiece so it gets more light in. And 10-time magnification seems to work pretty good. But 7 by 35s, I used them for a long time before I got my 10 by 50s. A lounge chair and a nice star hopping book, and you're all set. Get familiar with your telescope. A lot of times people come up, they'll bring the telescope up, they don't know how to use it. You need to get familiar. So bring it up here. We'll always help you, try to show you how to make it work. There are different parts that we're not going to go over. But learn what each knob does and know where they are in the dark because it's going to be hard to find. Don't over tighten it, just snug. Move the scope with the locks off. So they have locks, but unlock it so you can move it. Keep the optics clean, but do it carefully. There's certain ways to clean. If you don't clean carefully, you're going to ruin the coatings on the lenses and the mirrors and the such, and then effectively you could ruin them or cause a costly repair. And practice in the daylight. So get familiar with the sky. We have constellations, you know about those. The North Star, you know about Polaris, North Star. The significant thing about Polaris is from the northern latitude, it's always in the same place. So every day of the year, when I go out my kitchen door, I look to the right above the big maple tree, Polaris is right there. Every day, I look early in the morning, late at night, midnight, 4 o'clock in the morning, it's still in the same place. Everything kind of rotates because the Earth's axis points pretty much right at Polaris. Okay, so get to know where that is. The ecliptic is the path that the sun, the moon, and the planets follow across the sky every day. So when you see the planets and you see the moons here, well, you know that later on, or Jupiter's here, later on the moon's going to be there, or Saturn. They're all going to be in that basic same plane called the ecliptic. There's star maps. They're free. You get one free every month at a place called skymaps.com. I have on the table back there, I printed out. I only printed out 15, but we could print out more. I didn't want to, waste them. But you can print one out free every month. And side coordinates, ascension, descension. So using your new telescope, read the manual. Okay, don't just try to guess through it. Get someone to help you. It's a lot easier to have someone show you than have you doing it by yourself. So get someone who has a little bit of knowledge, or at least maybe could read along with you to help you. Make a red flashlight. So you can buy red flashlights. They're like $10. But you can go to the dollar store and buy a $1 flashlight and unscrew the cover and put a piece of red cellophane in there, and you have a red flashlight. We have rolls of red film here. So if you bring a flashlight sometime, come and see us and we'll help you make a red flashlight, as long as it comes off. Join the Astronomy Club. You're welcome to join us, the KS. Mark is a member as well, as are 2 of the interns out there. 3 of the interns out there are KS members. Take an astronomy course or class. Visit an observatory such as Kopernik. Read some books. That picture is just taken today, by the way. That's the domes, freshly painted. All right. So which scope is the best? So people are always asking, what's the best telescope? So I have a number of telescopes, but which one's the best? Which is my favorite? Well, unless you need a particular type of scope, like to look at the sun or look at the planets, you have something specific that you really want to look at, the best scope is the one that you're going to use the most. So I have some really good scopes. Well, I have a really good scope, but I only take it out when I go to star parties because it takes like an hour to set up and get it all adjusted. But then I set it up on Thursday night and leave it up Friday, Saturday, and take it down on Sunday or later. And we leave it up with special covers just out there, with the cover over it. So it's worth it. But when I just want to go outside for a while, I don't want to spend an hour setting my scope up. So I'll go out and I'll grab what Dave's going to tell you about, the grab and go, and take something simple that's really easy to use. So this scope here, 120 millimeter Alt-Az. It has slow motion controls, so it has these knobs. You turn them, so you don't have to move it, but you can move it slowly like that. This one here is not available right now, but the smaller version is about $350 with free shipping. Tripod, diagonal, and finder, and 2 eyepieces. So that's a pretty good deal. That's the Orion. Skywatcher, that's similar. That's a Celestron brand. Meade makes it. Orion makes it. Celestron, I said. There are a bunch of different companies. So it's easy to set up and use. That one now is about $460, but it doesn't come with the eyepieces anymore or the finder, which is disheartening. But there's this little one here, the Meade ETX, has a go-to database with 30,000 objects in it, but you have to calibrate it before you can go to. You can't just turn it on. They do have scopes you can do that. They can just turn on. The GPS knows where it is. It takes some pictures. It knows where it is, and then that's it. But you're talking $3,500 to $7,000. Okay. So if you want to get one for $500, you're not going to get that. Okay. 2 eyepieces. Now, they're what we call department store scopes. They advertise 454 power. You're looking through this little tiny 4mm eyepiece, and you're looking and trying to see something, and it's just like, wow, what am I doing? But it does do that 454 times, but it's like terrible. So be careful. They have shaky, lightweight mounts, inferior optics. They're frustrating, but they're not impossible. I remember we went up to Maine with my brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws and the kids, all the kids, and I asked my wife, I'm going to bring a telescope. And my wife said, we don't have room for a telescope. So I get up there and they go, Uncle Artie, where's the telescope? And I didn't bring it. So I went to a little place called Big Al's, and they had for like $10 a little tiny telescope with a little tripod. It was like this high. And I got down on my hands and knees on the ground, and it was shaking, but I got Jupiter and Saturn and all that stuff in there. And as long as they didn't touch it, it was great. So even that, it does work, but you're going to get frustrated. All right, so be careful. This is another advantage, another one here. I do have one of these called the Galileo scope. They're about $50. It comes as a kit. You build it. It's plastic. It's designed as an educational science experiment as well. It's got a very high quality objective lens, really cheap, crummy plastic lenses. But you know what? These lenses fit in that telescope. So I take some of my good lenses, and I put it in here, and I use that. And this is probably my go-to scope, believe it or not. They're laughing at you. But my scope isn't big. My friends have big scopes, 20 inches and 18 inches, and and I just have the little thing, So I don't even bring it. I just bring this, and I tease them about it. But it's a pretty good little kit in here. So that was actually designed in 2009 for the International Year of Astronomy. And the idea was to get your telescope cheap enough. They wanted to make it for $5 that every kid in the world can have one. Our club bought 100 of them, and we gave them out. And I was in this room with 40 families building a scope. George was in the room there. Fibber and Sally were in another room, all building them. All right, everybody get this piece, that piece put together and do this. And it was a great thing. It was designed by world-class telescope makers. And back then it was $25 in 2009. We bought 100 of them, so they cost us $12.50. But you had to pay shipping, which was added a lot. But, all right, so used telescopes. You can buy used telescopes. Start small. If you want more, sell it and go up a notch. Scopes hold their value. Eyepieces are standard. Scopes don't usually wear out if you use care. There's a place called Astromart. It's kind of like the eBay for astronomers. You have to apply to get in, pay a $15 a year fee. They check your address and make sure your stuff is all legitimate. And they kick you off really easily. You do anything shady, like you sell something and you don't tell them there's a dent, and they complain, they kick you off Astromart. And actually, at the astronomy shows, they sell T-shirts that say, "I was kicked off Astromart." It's kind of funny, but it's true. But it's a good, secure place. We also sell some used telescopes, and we use it to purchase new stuff here. Okay, so if you're interested, sometime we have some things to sell. Remember we looked at that one before that was $5,600 to $700,000. There's a used one. This was from Monday. He's selling it for $2,900, but his is from 1982. It's 40 years old. He's still getting $3,000, probably more than he paid for it back in 1982. Here's another one. That orange one back there. See that one? C8, a classic 8-inch. Selling it for $725, and it goes back to the 70s. Okay, it's even older. We have one of these out in the dome out there. It's the newer version of that C8. It's black. So where can you go to get help for deciding what scope? Come to Kopernik. Ask. Where can I get some help? Someone to help me learn how to use my scope. Well, like they did, come here. We'll help you. You too. Where can I get some help? Someone to help me find a scope. Come here. We'll help you. So I'm going to advertise AstroFest now. We have AstroFest every year. This is our 40th year in a row having AstroFest. It's 3 weeks from tonight on September 30th. It's October 1st. It's right here. We have speakers, demonstrations, viewing, and soul in the daytime also. So if you're inclined, come on down. $6 admission, just like it is here. Some cool websites, spaceweather.com. I like that. It talks about the sun and aurora and different things like that. There have been a lot of aurora. I've been getting a lot of emails about potential for aurora, but it's been cloudy and rainy so much that I haven't seen anything. But the sun is active, so it's possible. There's a website called Heavens Above, and there are other ones too. Actually, that last one has it also. But you can look up a satellite, the International Space Station. And if you look for tonight, it was at 5:42 this morning, but it was negative 3.8, which means it was very good, very bright. But tomorrow morning, if you want to get up at 4:56 and you look outside in the north-northeast, you'll see it for about 4 minutes, very bright going across the sky, the International Space Station. Okay. There's a great program called Stellarium. It's free. It's a database. It's a simulation of the sky, and you can move all around and zoom in on things and change the date. Like when I was planning a trip with a group of students a while back, I planned what I was going to be able to see that night by going ahead in time. But it's really good. It works with PCs and Apples, and even the what's the other one called, Jeremy? The regular, anyway, it works with all different platforms. There are plenty of apps for phones today. There's one that I have and Dave has called Sky Safari 4. It's free. You kind of turn it on and go up there, and it kind of shows you what you're looking at. Okay? There's Stellarium for the phone as well. Dave has one that has a compass on it. He'll tell you more about that later on. There's weather apps like WeatherBug. By the way, one of the WeatherBug stations is right here at Kopernik. We broadcast the data from here. The Clear Sky Chart, which is on the Kopernik website, but it tells you about the conditions in the sky, the clouds, how dark it's going to be, and all that. There's apps on the moon, like tonight's full moon, but you want it, what phase of the moon it's going to be on. And Dave has one called Sky Portal, which why don't you tell us about Sky Portal?
It's a three-piece kit. It comes together, and you get all the necessary parts to make it work. You'll get the diagonal, you get at least one eyepiece, maybe more, and you will also get the finder scope. You're not going to go out the first night, open the box, set it up in the driveway in the dark. There's a little bit too much to deal with. So you're going to have to open it in the house, practice in the house, and there's an awful lot of things you really can do. But let's start by taking it one section at a time. To have these go-to telescopes have their best performance, you start with the mount, and the top of the mount is supposed to be level. The mount itself has a bubble float in it, but that's real hard to use. So what I do, and what an awful lot of folks do, they'll just take a very small level and adjust the legs so that in all directions you get it pretty close to level. Then when you get ready to put this on, you want to double check what the level is telling you here also. However, the tripod is roughly 20 pounds in weight. The mount is about 40 pounds in weight. The optical tube is roughly another 20 pounds. And I haven't mentioned the counterbalance weights. this system comes with two counterbalance weights. One is 11 pounds and the other is 17 pounds. Well, you add all that up and you're over 100-pound weight. So you're not going to easily pick something like this up, move it, adjust the legs. So it's a lot easier to do it with nothing sitting on here and use a very inexpensive carpenter level. There's also this funny little pin. This is called the alignment pin, and this is very key if you want to get the go-to capability that it can do. What you do is you line this up and this leg as close to that North Star Polaris as you can get it. Then once you put this head down and you lock them all together, you know, there's a very nice bolt that goes into the bottom of the mount, and you just tighten it all down together. But to help really do an alignment, there is a very small internal telescope in here. And the whole purpose of that is to help you line right up precisely on Polaris, on the North Star. So the more you can, in advance, line this up and point it to the North Star, it's going to make things a whole lot easier for you. And Art listed some of the apps that are available for your cell phone. There is a very nice app that will show you where the North Star is and where Polaris is supposed to be. So you get a lot of help aligning these things up. If you don't do a decent job of doing what's called this polar alignment, you won't get the go-to capability that this is. Another very key thing about this is the saddle. This is where the optical tube is going to mount. This orange dovetail is the correct size to fit right into the saddle. And then you'll lock it down with these orange knobs on the side. Now, this particular saddle will handle two sizes. It will handle what's called the Vixen size. So that telescope has a Vixen dovetail. A lot of these others around here will have the Vixen size. That's a standard industry size. And this larger one is the Los Mandy size. Well, this saddle will handle both sides. So I can put a whole different collection of optical tubes in here. Some nights I want a small optical tube because I may want to look at a very big object like the Andromeda Galaxy. Or I may want to look at something like the Milky Way itself or one of the bigger nebulas. So I would have one size optical tube for one night. If I want to look at something very small, very remote, as an example, the Ring Nebula, that's a very popular object to look at. And the Orion Nebula is also very popular. I might want the full light gathering capability and the full magnification of this one. So I can use this with multiple different objects. This is where the counterweights go. It is very important that you find the balance point. There are two clutches on here, and this is not balanced right now, but if I release the clutch, it will now swing and move freely. You position the counterweights on this bar so that it will balance without any motion at all. That way you get the most performance out of the motors. And this is where the go-to functions really come in. There are two motors. There's one motor in here and a second motor here. One of the slides up here showed declination axis and right ascension axis. Those are the two axes in this system. These are both 12-volt motors. So you've got to get 12-volt power to the unit somehow. This would be the control that runs the whole thing. Art mentioned something like a 40,000 object database. Well, with this kind of a control unit, plugged in to just one port right here, you have the full 40,000 objects at your fingertips. So you can just push some of the buttons. You have to learn which buttons to push for what function. But you can now pick out your object, and very easily the mount will do all the work. So the mount is really the most, it's the most technical part. It's the most complex part of your whole system. When you buy a telescope set up like this, you want to get the best mount that you can. If you have to sacrifice on anything, you can probably cut down on the optical tube, and you can add more and more optical tubes as years go on. Now, this is supposed to be a lifelong hobby, so you will eventually keep adding things to it. But to set this up and set it up in the dark, it's easy. I've done it many, many times. This is the 12-volt power supply. This will just plug into an extension cord. So as long as you've got a power outlet in your driveway or somewhere close by, this one wire will connect to this little silver thing here, and that's all there is to the setup. You know, plugging in the control unit and plugging in your power supply.
We also have power supplies with 12 volt, like a cigarette lighter, plugged into a battery. So when you're in the field, you don't have to have the long extension cord. And that database of 40,000, realize you're not going to see it in Andromeda. You're not going to see Orion tonight, except for maybe right before sunrise. So, you know, you're only going to see the winter stars, the fall stars now. And then later on, you start seeing the winter stars coming up.
So if you get a system like this for use at your house, it's all pretty much self-contained. But as soon as you want to go to star parties, the way Art mentioned, you know, now you need some kind of a heavy battery, maybe an automotive 12-volt battery, or even a marine 12-volt battery. And this kind of a power cord will just connect you up in the field. You don't always have access to 110-volt, you know, AC power. But that it would be my preference is to use that kind of an adapter. Not going to say that much about the optical tube. This is referred to as the 9 1/4 inch. Again, it's the aperture. They're not all that heavy, you know. You've got to be able to lift something like this and slide it up into the saddle. And it's nice to have a friend standing by watching. On this particular optical tube, it did not come with this orange bar. That orange bar is accessories. I will put my finder scope, and there's many types of finder scopes that aren't covered also. But my finder scope will fit right on there. The diagonal will just connect in here, and the eyepiece. So that's pretty much a go-to system. Very nice to have. This unit is actually, it's 10 years old. I've used it quite a bit. It still works just as it did right out of the box, brand new. So as long as you take care of them, they're going to last good many years. Let me take the cover off over here. And thank you, Mark. Very handy again. This is the next generation to the tripod that's over there next to Art. Where'd we go? This optical tube is approaching 30 years old, and it's almost as good as new. So again, if you take good care of it, it's something you can use for years and years in this hobby. And on the side, this is the Telrad finder scope that was referred to in the presentation. So it doesn't matter whether it's vertical or whether it's kind of on the side. It works just as well either way. So no electricity, no motors, no batteries. This you run totally by hand, something you can pick up very quickly, take it out in the driveway, put it outdoors on the deck of your house, and just take a quick look at whatever object you're interested in. So that's pretty much the show and tell on the equipment. How about some questions? Yeah.
Did you say you add the counterweights and balance it before you put the tube on?
Yes, absolutely.
Could you repeat the question for the live?
The question was, do you put the counterweights on before you put the optical tube on, or do you put the optical tube on first? And the answer is you must put the counterweights on first. Let me demonstrate.
So they're on first, but it's not balanced yet. He has to adjust it. Okay?
All right, I have released the clutch on this, and if I let it go, it's going to turn by itself, and you're going to be banging. The optical tube is going to bang. So you always have to put the counterweights on, and probably put them very near the end of your stabilizing bar. Then, when you put the put the optical tube on last, then it won't move around on you. But once you get it all assembled, then you have to move the counterweights up and down and find the balance point. Some more questions? Jeremy, anything in chat?
Well, then here's some questions from the chat.
On the balance thing.
Mark?
What's the job here? Like, let's say you're using like a great big eyepiece that's heavy. You can take a magnet and put a magnet down here as a balance to kind of balance that. That way that won't tip on you.
Yep. Yep.
All right, yep. So first one from Jennifer Mullen is asking, they say they have a Celestron first scope 76 millimeter reflector. They're asking, can I use this to view the planets? And they have eyepieces ranging from 20 millimeter to 4 millimeter. And what would you suggest using?
Okay, so definitely if you use
All right,
that.
you need the mic. I took your...
That's okay. Definitely you could use that scope to see the planets, especially the bright ones like Jupiter and Saturn. The 20 millimeter eyepiece would be great. If you want to look at the craters of the moon, that 4 millimeter will get you some really detail on that. So they would all work to do that, the planets, the bright objects.
Next up, we have Harvey Black asking, is there any good suggestions for a kit to hook up a telescope to a computer? Make it, assumedly, a simple process.
Okay, I'll repeat what I heard here. Suggestions for hooking your telescope up to the computer. The answer is yes, there are a lot of ways of doing that. There are external computer units. Matter of fact, that's what I use that top orange bar for, is I will mount a very special control unit on there, and it will control both the mount and any camera that I happen to put on here. The way that works, I'll take the handheld control unit, and what's hidden is down the bottom of this handheld unit, there is a USB connection. So you run one wire from the hand controller into this small computer control unit, and then the computer control unit will totally run the whole mount for you, and it can even run and control the cameras that you may put on there. But that's a whole different story than just out viewing, with an eyepiece. When you're doing that kind of work with a telescope, you don't have the diagonal on.
Yes, I have another one here. Robert asks, just to confirm, what mount is the Celestron one you have there?
This mount, 10 years old, this is referred to as the Celestron German Equatorial mount. It's out of production now, but the second generation of this C-GEM, we just refer to it as the C-GEM system, that is being marketed by a number of secondary stores on behalf of Celestron. But interestingly enough, even though they are on the market, they're not available. COVID has wrecked an awful lot of our supply lines. And when you go online and you start looking to purchase something such as this, you're going to see out of stock, sold out, extended delay in ordering. So there's all kinds of problems in actually getting some of these. But when they do come available, the prices are going to be up. I know the second generation, second version of this, the price is up about 30% from what I paid 10 years ago.
And that's it for live stream.
All right, one more time. How about questions here? The question is, what's a plausible eyepiece? Yeah.
It's a design for the eyepiece. It's a modern design, as opposed to the Erfel and some of the older designs. It's cheaper to manufacture, but it gives you high quality images. So most of the eyepieces that we would buy would be plausible. It's just a design.
An eyepiece is not just one piece of glass in the lens. There's multiple pieces that work together to focus the light. And that name is typical of one particular design. And again, it's a very common, I'll say it's a medium of the road eyepiece. There are some eyepieces that will go as high as $700 or even $1,000. But this, you can probably get a good lens, $100, $150.
$40, $50. Not the name brand, but they're good quality. Actually, some people did research and they're made by the same manufacturer, and just not, instead of having aluminum tube, then you have a carbon fiber tube. This is a Keller eyepiece, an older design. They have different eyepieces. This is just a design of the eyepiece.
There is one more question from Harvey Black again, asking, their frame of view right now is coming from that camera, so their backdrop are these paintings on the wall. So they're asking, is there a story about those paintings?
So the paintings that you see on the wall here, there's actually two of them, and I'll pan for those on the live stream, are actually paintings that were done by, at the time it was a local artist. Her name is Ruby Wang, and actually was, I guess, quite a very famous artist. And a little personal aside is actually, her sons were in the same Boy Scout troop as I was. And, I didn't realize that she was an artist, but I believe she has since moved back to China a number of years ago. But she donated these pieces of art to us, and they really are lovely. And we're really very happy to have them. We're actually very fortunate to have a number of significant pieces of artwork and some great photographs. There's actually, we have a photograph down there, autographed by Clyde Tombaugh. Clyde Tombaugh was the astronomer who discovered the dwarf planet Pluto. And I have my own little personal. People are all upset about Pluto being demoted, and I feel like if you called it anything but Pluto, called it Aldon, nobody would care. But because it has the same name as that cute Disney dog, everyone's all up in arms of it. But anyway, so that's another story. So anyway, those pictures those paintings are by Ruby Wang. Any other questions in the house? Otherwise, I know a number of people had brought some scopes for us to sort of help help you figure out what you got and what's missing and how to sort of get started. So we'll try to set up a couple of tables in here. For those that have to comply with the order of looking through a telescope, Saturn and the Moon are out. Jupiter will be up very soon. So if you go straight through the straight through the lobby, through the double doors, take a moment for your eyes to acclimate to the light. We've got a couple of scopes in the yard, but then also we'll have scopes out in the domes, and also we've got our 20-inch dome open, which is our largest telescope, and it's the one that we use to take pictures. And so Patrick is there, and he'll show you the process that we use. Dave Carter. Dave Carter will do a little tour. So anyway, I want to thank Art and Dave. Thank you so much for your time and expertise, and look forward to seeing you guys out in the domes. Now next week we've got another great presentation. Peter Klimas is a physics teacher at Vestal High School. His talk is going to be called "The Marriage of the Sun and the Moon." He's going to talk about some of the folklore of how people thought about the sun and the moon and how their relation to each other, and ultimately how they connect with science. The week after that is a film festival called Exposure, and it's curated by Binghamton University professor Tomo Nishikawa. And these little short films that will be, they sort of have sort of an astronomical bent to them, but it's sort of where art meets science. And then at the end of this month, September 30th and October 1st is Astrofest. This will actually be our 40th Astrofest. It's a 2-day astronomy festival with a number of just outstanding speakers, both in the evening but also all day Saturday. We'll be doing some solar observing. So definitely worth coming back for that as well. So with that, I think we'll bid those on the live stream adieu, and we'll see you out in the yard.
Come on up if you want. All right, so who needs help with scopes? You do?
I guess we didn't talk about it, but that's okay. That's it for now.
We got some star charts as well. Right here. Feel free to take one.
Well, that's good. Mark, why don't you have her bring that scope right up here?